Hello everyone and welcome to Ticker Markets. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Nadir Godrej, and we're going to talk about agri-commodities and his views on that. Welcome to Ticker Markets, sir.
Thank you.
The first question I want to ask is your broader outlook on Indian edible oil sector and commodity sector, sir.
The Indian edible oil sector is very large. Oil consumption is steadily rising. I think we have reached about close to 17 kilos per capita, but in many countries it can go as high as 21 or 22 kilograms per capita, and India will also reach that stage. That means we will need to consume much more oil over the years. Our population is growing a little bit faster than 1% a year, so that also adds to the demand. And we are very, very dependent on imports, which is likely to continue, though the government is trying to plant more oil seeds, increase the yield of oil seeds, and also grow more oil palm in India, because oil palm yields a lot of oil per hectare, far more than any other crop. So in spite of all these efforts, we will still continue to import a lot of oil.
Sir, it seems that government is very proactive in term of raising import duties on various commodity products. So how will it impact your business, sir?
As a palm oil producer in India, the raising of the import duties actually will benefit us to a little bit, to a small extent. Raising of import duties is extremely good for the government because they get far more revenue, and it doesn't really impact the consumer that much because India being the biggest importer of edible oils, the exporting countries take the hit of the higher duties. Immediately after we impose these higher duties, prices fell in those countries, and that is likely to happen. Will it stimulate more production? Palm oil takes oil palm tree takes 5 or 6 years to grow before it starts giving yield. In 7 or 8 years, it's the peak yield. So it'll take a long time in the case of oil palm, but it might stimulate more production of soybeans and rapeseed, India's two major oilseed crops.
Sir, do you see any key concerns that are currently affecting the business environment overall? And tight liquidity is one of the factors. So what are your views on that, sir?
Tight liquidity affects smaller businesses. We as a fairly conservative business, we do not borrow a lot of money. We are usually not concerned by tight liquidity issues. But recently the RBI has recognized that liquidity is very tight and has taken some measures to increase liquidity that will help the Indian economy at large. As far as our businesses are concerned, it's not going to have much of an impact.
So, what are your plans for Godrej Agri-products? And are you worried about the trade war which is going on between US, China, US putting sanctions on Iraq? Multiple countries are there. So, what are your views on that?
We don't see much of an impact on these trade wars in our sector. We do think that since China will not be buying soybean meal from the US and they will try and buy substitutes, it's very likely that more soybean meal will go from India to China. It's also likely that more rapeseed meal will go from India to China. The government has incentivized these exports. That may slightly increase the costs of our raw materials, but we have a very active R&D center. We are trying to bring new raw materials into play. We are trying to introduce high-tech raw materials that can reduce the use of conventional raw materials and improve the farmers' yields for the products. And we think that our R&D efforts will keep us in a comfortable position.
Sir, government has raised MSP on agri-commodities lately. What are your views? Where else do you think government should step in?
I think the government has already put a lot of commodities on MSP. There is no way the government can buy all these commodities. Some of these new commodities, the government has been unable to buy them. The government is thinking of going on to a Bhavantar scheme, which is a price differential scheme. And I think that is a much better idea, but it's not all that easy to operate. It will take some time to establish such a scheme. In the meantime, I think it is going to be difficult for farmers to get the MSPs in many cases, which is unfortunate. but the government will have to do a lot of work before they get that scheme properly useful to the farmers.
Thanks a lot for talking to
Thank you. Thank you.